What the difference is between real intelligence or AGI is you expect the system to, first of all, deeply understand what you're saying. Secondly, to remember what you said. So what if you say something early in the conversation, you expect it to remember that and use that information later on.
Welcome to Monday Mornings with Michelle, the new business podcast. Whether you're kicking off your day or kickstarting your business, Michelle is going to kick your ass into next week with the essential fours: strategy, systems, support, and state of mind. Now, welcome to center stage, Michelle Nedelec.
Hey there, peeps. This is Michelle Nedelec, and I am super glad that you're here with us today because I am here with my amazing guest, Peter Voss. Peter, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Yeah, well, thanks for the invitation.
Awesome. Super excited about this. So let everybody know who you are and the 5,000-foot view of what you love to do.
Yes, I'm the CEO and chief scientist of Aigo.ai. And my company has developed over many years, actually, conversational AI that actually has some real intelligence. So we call our current product a chatbot with a brain, because most chatbots don't have a brain. And that's my passion, artificial intelligence.
Awesome. I love it. So how did you get into artificial intelligence and chatbots?
Yeah, so I started out as an electronics engineer, actually, working on the chips that make computers work. And then I fell in love with software, and my electronics company turned into a software company, and I developed ERP software suite for small businesses. And that became quite successful. We went from the garage to 400 people and did an IPO. So that was super exciting. We'd love to do that again.
Nice. Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. And it's, when I exited that company, that I thought, I had time on my hands and said, well, what big project do I want to tackle? And what struck me is that software really is pretty dumb. It doesn't have any common sense. It doesn't think or reason. While I was very proud of the software we developed, it was still, I realized the limitations. So I wanted to figure out how we can make software more intelligent. And I took 5 years off to study intelligence, all different aspects of intelligence, even how do children learn, and how does our intelligence differ from animal intelligence? What do IQ tests measure? And even sort of the basic questions of philosophy, epistemology, theory of knowledge. What is reality, and how do we know anything? How can we be certain, of things? So the culmination of all of that was that I came up with a theory of how to build a thinking, learning machine, a system that can learn and think more like we humans do. And so in 2001, I then launched a company to turn these ideas into actual prototypes. And for several years, we were in pure R&D mode. And then in 2008, we launched our first commercial company, automating call center calls intelligently. Wow.
So explain the difference between an algorithm that kind of takes a consistent amount of data and incorporates it as its now new algorithm versus artificial intelligence, or is that essentially the same thing?
So, yeah, it's actually pretty confusing. So on the one hand, you have, what most people would just consider programming. You program the system and you have a lot of essentially if then else statements, and say, if that happens, then do something else. But the term AI has changed quite a bit over the years, and it's sort of gone through summers and winters. So, AI, when the term was coined originally some 60 odd years ago, it was really about building thinking machines, to build, machines that can think and reason the way humans do. But that turned out to be really, really hard. So over the decades, AI really turned into what is best described as narrow AI. It's solving one problem at a time. And, like when IBM became the world chess champion. It was just solving the problem of playing chess. Now, that machine, Deep Blue, couldn't even play checkers, so it was very narrowly designed. But, people like to use the term AI for that because they got funding and it was like a sexy term. And then you had the AI winter where suddenly everybody got, disappointed by the limitations of AI, and then nobody would call their products AI at all. So about 8-9 years ago, the big companies like Google and Amazon and the companies that have a lot of data, that have a lot of computing power, figured out how they could use this massive amount of data and computing power to actually do some really revolutionary things, much better than they'd been done before, like image recognition, improving speech recognition, and of course, targeted advertising, $1 trillion business, how they could do this much more effectively. So that technology is called deep learning, machine learning. And they attached the label AI to that. It was sort of came out of the field of AI research. So AI became a sexy term again, an acceptable term, and everybody started calling their companies .ai instead of .com. That helped with fundraising and so on. But all of that is still not really anything like the original AI. So I actually coined the term together with 2 other people of AGI, artificial general intelligence, in 2001 to signify the original idea of AI. So it's very confusing. You have sort of what you would just call programming, which is often just sold as AI. And then you have some people working on sort of real AI, AGI.
Nice. Love that. And thank you for it. Does it really, when it comes to using software, does it make a difference whether or not it's just programming or different differentiations of AI?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you get like in normal programming, you get good programs and you get mediocre programs and you get really bad programs. And the same is true for the sort of narrow AI that we see all around us. But inherently, there are severe limitations. I mean, if you are, looking at, the good example is when you call into a company and you talk to a computer. I mean, usually people are pretty disappointed with that, to say the least. And the reason for that is that they are just, normal programs, or call them narrow AI. They don't have any intelligence. They don't really understand what you're saying. They just respond like a stimulus response. If you say blah 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 something weather, then it'll trigger the weather report, and okay, that's fine. But if you say I hate Uber, don't ever give me Uber again, it'll probably still trigger the Uber app, and say, well,
well, you want Uber?
Yeah, and well, I don't have anything against Uber, but and then somebody wrote a little program to say, well, where do you want to go? How many people are going, and do you want Uber X? And I mean, there's no real intelligence involved in that, and that's really what pretty much everybody's doing with chatbots these days. Now, some of it can be pretty neat, like you have Alexa and Siri, and close the blinds, or play Misty for me, or whatever, and but it doesn't go beyond that. There's no, so what the difference is between real intelligence, or AGI, is you expect the system to, first of all, deeply understand what you're saying. Secondly, to remember what you said. So if you say something early in the conversation, you expect it to remember that and use that information later on. You don't have to repeat yourself, but also even to have long-term memory and to be able to reason. If you hired a personal assistant that worked for you, and they didn't remember what you said 2 sentences ago, or didn't take into account that you said, I hate Uber, they wouldn't last very long, So you really want an intelligent system, but for that, you need the technology, you need that brain that can actually make sense of what you're saying and remember and reason.
Now, would it be easier for you to program in a chatbot than it would be for, say, Google to figure out what I'm looking for when I'm looking for something? Because sometimes I ask for a white horse and it gives me blue mountains. And it's like, okay, not even close.
Right.
So how do you program that in when, maybe somebody's saying something that just doesn't fit with the information that you have?
Yeah, I think the best way to think of this is, if you had a human that you gave the same information, I mean, they can't read your mind, so they may also misunderstand, but then they're probably smart enough, if they don't understand, to know that they're not understanding and to ask you, you didn't really give me enough information for me to do this job. So, having intelligence obviously is key to being able to, to be helpful, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's not going to make you omniscient.
What? And here we were so hopeful about that.
Yeah, and even with the most advanced real intelligence development, we are still quite a long way from human level intelligence. One of our big clients is 1-800-Flowers, and we developed a concierge chatbot. Well, we don't even like to call it a chatbot, but a concierge assistant for people. So 1-800-Flowers is a group of companies. They sell popcorn and chocolates, and Harry and David is part of it, and so on. And so as our system gets to know the customer, they know who they're buying presents for, what the occasion is. So, if you say, I wanted to buy chocolates for my niece Amy's birthday, then an intelligence system would now know that you have a niece called Amy, and it's her birthday and she likes chocolates, or at least you're buying chocolates for her, and let's hope she likes chocolate. So, and the system should, take that information as a human would, and as you carry on in the conversation, it would take that into account. It wouldn't then ask you what's the occasion, or what do you want to buy, or who you want to buy it for. And similarly, it should remember that. So next day when you call up and said, oh, I found out she doesn't really need one chocolate, can I change the order to flowers, then it should hopefully make sense of that.
So is the difference between your chatbot and others just the sheer complexity of it? Because that sounds really intense, being able to know who's calling in, what they're recommending, what they take away from the recommendations. If they're just having a conversation about the weather, they don't really want updates on the weather. That sounds intensely complex.
It is, but it's not just that it's more complex. I mean, yes, it is more complex, but it's not the complexity that makes it work. It's really the approach to how you build such a system. So all the chatbots out there, like Siri and Alexa and so on, they use a big data approach. They use statistical approaches. So they give them millions or gazillions of examples of what people might say, and then they are tagged and say, well, if it has this kind of pattern, then that's what they want. It's a statistical categorizer, and that's the approach that basically pretty much everybody uses, is big data. So it's a quantity of data that sort of does the limited magic, that it does. But ultimately, you're not a statistic, and your conversation is not a statistical one. I mean, the one we're having now probably hasn't been had exactly like this before, so it's not the average. So you really need to build a system that can work with, that concentrates on the quality of the data you're getting and how you use it rather than the quantity. And that's a fundamentally different approach. It requires the person designing such a system to really understand what intelligence entails.
Well, absolutely. And conversation, which I would think is one of
Correct.
the most complex things that human beings do. So who can take the most advantage of your systems versus kind of the other ones that are out there?
Well, anybody using a chatbot, because invariably you want more intelligence, and we have, customers in banking and medical applications. There are also personal applications like helping people to manage their diabetes. So you have this personal assistant that can, help people manage diabetes. For training purposes, as an HR help desk in a large company, anywhere where basically you want or need to have a conversation that goes beyond just give me my bank balance, and that's the one shot where you could just say something, close the blinds and okay, you're done, and only one set of blinds you want to close, or something. So really anywhere. Now, the setup and the integration of a system, with sort of the backend system, whatever knowledge you need to get from, about the customer and to update, if you take an order, update the order, or do a banking transaction or insurance or whatever it might be. The integration still tends to cost money. You have to, be concerned about security and, reliability and all of those things. So currently we are focusing on working with very large companies, because the implementation process is fairly involved. But over time, we are building out implementation tools to make the implementations easier and easier, that we can also offer this to smaller companies, effectively. Now, our long-term view is to make Aigo, which we call our assistant Aigo, to make Aigo available to individuals as a personal assistant. And we actually call this a personal assistant. And it should really be called a personal assistant, because
for redundancy or for some other reason.
For some other reason, because there are three different meanings of the word personal that are actually important here. The first meaning is personal. You own it; it's yours. So it belongs to you. It serves your purpose and not some mega corporation's purpose. So that's the ownership. The second part is it's personalized to you. It's customized to you. It knows, your preferences, what you like, your history, and so on. And the third personal is the privacy issue, that certain things are personal. You want to be able to share your deepest, darkest secrets with Aigo and feel comfortable that Aigo will only share whatever you want Aigo, whatever you wanted to share with whomever you want to share it. So that the privacy issue, and that's sort of our longer term view. And we have some projects in the pipeline to start offering this to individuals. But that's ultimately having, it's like an exocortex. It's like an extension to your own brain on the one hand, and it's like a little angel on your shoulder that can, give you good advice and kind of keep you out of trouble.
Nice. So is your plan to kind of drip down, if you will, from smaller to smaller companies, make it more and more affordable? Or would it be something that you just go to, say, directly to Apple or whatever and install it like an app in phones so that you're kind of hitting everybody all the time?
Yeah, we're trying to figure out what the best way is, and there are a couple of areas we're pursuing. One of them is for salespeople. If you have, you might know that salespeople typically hate to update their CRMs, Salesforce or whatever. They don't do it. But if they had a personal assistant that they could just talk to and say, hey, tell me about my next appointment, what product are they interested in? Do they have any kids, or what are their hobbies? And then once you're done with the sales call, you can just say to Aigo, remind me next Tuesday to follow up, send them brochure X, and let my boss know what's going on. Now, you could imagine that a salesperson using Aigo like that during the workday would then very naturally say, hey, Aigo, remind me to pick up the kids on the way home. And, and then your spouse would probably want an Aigo as well. So that's sort of going from business use into, private use for the individual is one area of doing it. We're also talking to a number of universities. Whereas as a student, it can be pretty frightening, I guess, first when you first get to college. If you had an Aigo that can help you find your way around, and tell you about where you get your books or your lunch, or help you with plan your studies and tell you about lectures and whatever, then that would also be, a very useful personal assistant. So we're exploring different possibilities there, but as I say, we're not really. We're still a long way from human level intelligence. So you need to hit the sweet spot of something that's good enough that it will really be helpful for people, and people will use it, without it, being as capable as a motivated human.
I love it. 'Cause you've almost got me to buy in, which is kind of funny, because I am the one person's going, I am never getting a Siri in my house. I don't need people eavesdropping. I know my phone eavesdrops on me all the time, but it's beside the point. I'm still in denial. But something like what you're describing sounds fantastic in that, I mean, it eliminates the need to train something. So would it interconnect into other databases so that it's acquiring, like, let's go back to the student example. If somebody is going, hey, is this, chemistry class the same as I learned in grade 7? Like when we did this thing, is this the same thing, and they're just doing it differently? And if it can give me that kind of feedback, or how do I get a tutor on this chem class? And it shows me the tutors or the classes that can do that. That seems like an intense amount of data to be pulling.
Yeah, absolutely. But an intelligent system like that wouldn't need to know all that information. Like a human, we are good tool users. So, Aigo could Google it basically, and say,
and probably Google it better than I do.
Yeah, I mean, Googling is hard, and Aigo would have infinite patience, to try different things and click on this link and click on that link and say, oh no, this is nonsense, and I'll look at something else. So yeah, absolutely. And Aigo is a good tool user, so it can look at different websites and basically do research for you. It doesn't need to know all the. I mean, it can't possibly have all up-to-date information. So yeah, that's a way it would connect to whatever we would connect to potentially, but just, as I say, have a lot more patience, to do the research.
Fair enough. Don't program in emotions or irritability into your system.
No, we won't do that at all. No.
Thanks. So with the system, the way it works right now, are you looking at? Do you maintain and do you do the data entry initially in the setup for the chatbots, or are you looking to have the company bring in their IT department and do maintenance? How are you looking at those things?
So whatever works best for the client. Now, most of our customers, or most companies, not just large companies, have a huge backlog of things they want to do and need to do. So more often than not, they will be happy for us to help them implement it. Now, we are actually quite unique in that we don't supply this as a SaaS service. So basically, we don't have Aigo running on our service. We provide Aigo to run behind their firewall, basically, on their service. So that makes them a lot more comfortable about, data security and so on. But we help them basically set it up, and we work with partners as well who help to implementation partners. So it's either we do it, implementation partner might do it, or the customer themselves can do it. If they want to. So it can be any of those, but typically we tend to be involved in helping them set it up.
Very cool. So my brain goes into the whole IT and server thing. And peeps, if you're listening to this, you can ignore this next part if you really want to. But I'm thinking that must be an intense amount. So they get an entire server with Aigo on it, or is it really as simple as uploading software to their systems?
Well, it's a little bit, nothing is ever that simple with large corporations,
right?
it can take 4 or 5 months just to kind of get the security clearance and
Well,
credentials, for companies to work through that. But it is technically actually much simpler. I mean, these days, I think every company I've come across use cloud services. They use one of the big three cloud services. So Aigo actually gets deployed in whatever cloud service they prefer, and we just set up a cluster in their cloud service to run that runs Aigo. So it's not that you need to get hardware these days for that. And it's a Docker image that gets copied across and duplicated, and the scaling and that is all managed. So yeah, it's not really the pain in implementing. It tends to be more getting through security and legal and working out with QA of how they want Aigo to say things, that marketing will sign off on, customer support will sign off on, legal will sign off on, and security. So that's typically the challenge of working through those.
Nice. So you have a little bit of a long tail when it comes to setting things up. So who would you say is your ideal client? Who are you looking for right now to be able to serve and support, and that might kind of take you in the direction that you want your company to go in?
Yes. So, certainly any large company, large enterprise, like whether it's retail, banking, communication, insurance, healthcare, any of those companies, roadside assistant, really any large company. And we supply Aigo both customer facing and also internally in the company. So, if a company has thousands or tens of thousands of employees, then just the help desk for IT and for HR become a big headache. So, if the employees can just talk to Aigo and say, what's the policy on maternity leave, or whatever, what's the current COVID policy, and then Aigo will remember, it will know who they're talking to, will have their particular information, and it's not like you have to wait for whatever, half an hour to talk to somebody. Nice.
So give us an example of one of your favorite client stories, one of their best experiences.
Well, I think the story that I really like, which sort of amplifies the 1-800-Flowers story, is we actually, they came to us, they heard me talk about this on a podcast, and they contacted us and said, we've been trying to do something like that for a number of years. And these are the owners of the company. I mean, it's now a multi-billion-dollar company. But when they started one shop that they had, they knew most of their customers, and they could really give this hyper-personalized service. And as they grew now, they've been looking to ways to provide that kind of service to their customers. So several years ago, they wanted to develop this kind of concierge assistant, and they contracted with some large companies providing this, and they struggled for 2 years to try and put this together, spent, I don't know, millions of dollars on it, and they just couldn't cut it, with that. The technology just wasn't up to it, using conventional chatbot technology. They really needed a brain. But what really struck me is that vision that the owners of the company have to provide that kind of service, to be able to, even with more than 10 million customers, to be able to offer that kind of hyper personalized service, which people just aren't getting from large companies. You're just a number, you're a statistic, you're demographic, and if you want to talk to a human in a call center, chances are it's going to be a pretty frustrating experience.
Yeah, there's a very large company around here that we tease that their motto is, "We're not happy till you're not happy."
Oh, wow.
They could probably benefit from it.
Sounds like a telco.
Yeah, bang on.
Okay.
So tell me, what kind of frustrations might somebody be having in a larger company that they're going like, we need this so bad?
So actually, it's really difficult to run a call center well. It's actually very hard to get people and to keep people. It's not a job that most people make a career of. And, training and motivating people, just getting people in a call center, and then compounding the support problem that you have, the service problem that you have by long wait times. There are always peak periods. Now, of course, a company like 1-800-Flowers is this extreme where you have, Valentine's Day and Mother's Day, which, just goes through the roof. You go from, probably a few hundred people to a few thousand people in that you need for support. So it's really hard to basically provide good service in a call center. So there are things that do require human touch, that require that kind of judgment when things get escalated and you need to kind of break the rules, where you can't go by the rule book anymore. But the majority of interactions is people just want to get stuff done. Mm-hmm. They don't particularly want to talk to a human and talk about sports scores or whatever. If you can just get your delivery confirmation or change an order or make a payment or whatever the case may be, do that effectively. So it's not actually, a lot of people think that by call center automation, the motivation is to save money. But yes, of course you'll save money. It costs less to have a computer system in the long run than humans. But the much bigger benefit is you can provide better service, much better service. You're not going to have, the variability of quality of different agents or the lack of training. You're not going to have wait times, And with Aigo, you have memory. I mean, imagine calling your cable company. You say, Wi-Fi isn't working anymore. And, of course, they'll tell you, well, reboot the system, Okay. And then, okay, maybe you need to move the router closer to whatever, move it into the kitchen or something, try there. So you might go through that. So then, okay, I'll try that. And then you call again an hour later and say, well, no, that didn't work. Okay, have you tried rebooting the system? And they don't remember. Of course, you're talking to a different person. And they don't remember. But imagine now you're talking to Aigo, and Aigo knows, okay, you've already rebooted the system 3 times, so no point in doing that again. I know you moved into the kitchen, so you can provide much, much better service, and the CFOs will love it at a lower cost.
Oh, absolutely. That sounds awesome. So I know that our listeners are going to want more from you. How do they start their journey with you?
Just contact us.
Phone me.
That's simple. Aigo.ai. I also, for those interested in, some of the sort of technical background of AGI, and even futurism in terms of, where are we going with AI and ethics and things like free will. I've actually written a lot of articles on that. They're all linked from our website, and they're also on medium.com, so you can just easily find it. But yeah, you can email me, peter@aigo.ai, or just contact us on our website. So that's just easy as that.
Nice. I love that. So going completely left field, I have to ask you this. At what point in life did you know you were a special kind of crazy enough to think that you could become an entrepreneur?
Well, actually, when people ask me a sort of, what advice would I give people, or what are sort of related to that, probably the biggest regret I have that I only started my first company at 25. And I wish I'd done it when I started work at 60, and I wish I'd sort of done it straight away, because there's nothing like actually doing it, running a business or being a co-founder or something, but, basically being responsible for the success of a company. And there's just so much that you learn, your experience is just that, being responsible for making things happen. It's very different. So I wanted to, sort of have my own business from really when I started. But as I say, it took me a while before I actually did that, jumped in the deep end.
Why is that? Why did it take you a while before you jumped?
Well, I guess I had to feed myself, so.
Bill?
So, yeah, it's and also I did obviously take I had to learn about electronics. I sort of get into the career of being an electronics engineer, so I had to get that training somewhere first. But I still could have started earlier. So.
I love it. I could pick your brain all day, I know, but I value your time immensely. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Any last words for our peeps?
No, just, be positive in life. Technology is awesome, and AI is going to just make life even better for us. It'll help us make better decisions. It'll help us solve many of the problems that we have. So, yeah, it'll help us. So,
love it. Thank you so much. This is Michelle Nedlak. Thank you for being here with us today. Be sure to subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast app so that we can help you scale your business. We love having you here. Have a great day.
Bye. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you for listening to our show. I'm all about being a resource center for entrepreneurs to give them the information and the support that they need to make it in business. As such, the notes for this show can be found at our website at awarenessstrategies.com/blog. Be sure to subscribe, give us a rating. I like 5 stars personally, and share with your friends.